Hi there everyone, and welcome to the first lesson of the Web Development Club Facebook group. As I said yesterday, these lessons are all about you getting involved and learning how to build your own website. If there is a topic you want me to cover, and I haven't said I'm going to cover it in the near future, then make sure you tell me that you want me to cover it. You can do this by leaving a comment underneath one of the videos, or you can do this by sending me a message on Facebook. Right, so to today's lesson. Today's lesson is all about acronyms. Hopefully you can see the slides that I've prepared on the left here. If you have any problems and you can't see them, I'm also going to put them up as a PDF file that you will be able to download and look at your leisure. PDF is also one of the acronyms we're going to be covering today. So, first things first, what are acronyms? Acronyms are shortened versions of words or phrases, and generally they're shortened to make them quicker and easier for those that use them every day to understand. In terms of web development, acronyms are used to explain normally very long or very complicated phrases that we use every day. And it's done so that other people who are also developing their own websites or have knowledge of how to develop their own websites will understand what you mean. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of acronyms out there. And we're going to cover just a very, very small fraction of the ones that I think are very important. And at the end, there's a little surprise for you, something that I haven't done yet, but I will be doing over the next week to hopefully help you make the most out of these lessons. So, as you can see, we're going to cover a total of 34 acronyms today. These are the acronyms which I think you're most likely to encounter when designing your own website, but they're not all of the acronyms. And if there are others, I'll be able to show you a way at the end of this lesson that you'll be able to look up any acronym you find online and get a description of what the acronym means, as well as the actual words that it represents, or the phrase it represents, of course. So, on to the first acronym. The first acronym is HTML. If you've looked anything up to do with web development or web design, you probably would have come across this acronym. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. Now, a language in web development terms is code that you type into a document that then tells the web browser or the website browser how to display, or what and how to display things on a page. HTML, I think of HTML, and I think it's the best way to describe this, as the layout element of the code. You use HTML to tell the web browser where to put things, in what order to put things, and literally where they should be on a page, how far into the page, whether they should sit on top of everything else, or whether they should be in the background. HTML has hundreds of elements to it. An element is something like a text box or a box with a border around it. That is an element. Each one of these elements is represented by a different code word, and each code word can have many options that you type next to the code word to tell the web browser what the element should look like. Now, HTML works with our next acronym, CSS. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. I had to remind myself there. Cascading Style Sheets are the language, or again, the code, that we use to tell the web browser what the page should look like in terms of design. So the colours, images it should use in a background, borders, and things like that. It works with HTML, and it adds a layer on top of the basic HTML code to make, as I frequently say to people, it makes the website look pretty. The HTML is the layout and the structure, and the CSS sits on top of that and makes it look pretty, and makes it look like something you would want to look at. And that's all there is to it. And next on our list is JS. JS stands for JavaScript. Now, JS or JavaScript is not as well used within the web development industry. However, it is used often enough that I thought it was worth including it in here. As I said, it stands for JavaScript. Now, JavaScript is a language or code that allows you to perform actions on the HTML and the CSS code after the page has finished loading. Before JavaScript existed, you could not do this. HTML and CSS are static. That is to say, when the page has loaded, you cannot change that page. JavaScript adds an element of dynamism into it and makes the page dynamic. It does things like it allows you to check a form, a contact form, or a address form when you're checking out on an online shop or an online store, to make sure there aren't any errors, and tells you about the errors before it sends the data you put into that form to a web server to be processed. So the next one is PHP. PHP stands for Pre-Hypertext Processing. Now, as the name indicates, pre-hypertext means that this language or code is processed before HTML and before CSS and before JavaScript. It's actually processed by the server, by the web server, before the results, along with the HTML code and the CSS code and the JavaScript code, are then sent and transferred to the web browser, and the web browser then displays them. It processes the code that it receives and displays them to you. PHP allows us to do things like connect to a database and store information in a database. So that can be things like products in a shop, the information from a contact form, or a blog. And moving on, we have IMG. IMG is pronounced img. I don't know why. It sounds rather silly, but that's the way it's pronounced, as I've always been told. It stands for one word, which is only slightly longer, and again it means that this shorthand is not spoken very much, but you will encounter it every time you use an image in your HTML code. And it stands for image, as you may have guessed. It literally is used within HTML code to represent and tell the web browser that it is going to display an image. There are options after the IMG element that allow you to tell the web browser what size the image is, whether the image has an alternative piece of text that you can display next to it, or instead of it, if the image is unavailable. It also has an option that tells you where to get the image from, which obviously is rather important when you're displaying an image, as the browser needs to know where to look for the image in order to show you the image. So, moving on, the next one is WYSIWYG. Now, WYSIWYG stands for a phrase which I quite like, and I think is something that a lot of web designers and web developers would do well to stick to. And that phrase is, what you see is what you get. Now, normally, this acronym, WYSIWYG, is used to describe software or parts of a website like a text editor that shows you in real time what the finished content of the website page will look like. That can be a text editor that's built into a blog that allows you to set how bold or the font size or the font color or even the font itself is displayed, and generates all of the code for that, the HTML, the CSS, and in some cases JavaScript as well, without you having to put any code in yourself. These systems are very good for basic text editing and image manipulation. Beyond that, you're better off writing your own code to ensure that you don't introduce things that conflict with other elements of your website. And the next one, we're whizzing through them here. We are on number 7 already, I believe, 6 or 7. So the next one is AJAX, AJAX. And AJAX stands for Asynchronous JavaScript and XML. AJAX is a way or a technique of programming that used to be limited just to JavaScript, but more recently has been used and copied by lots of different programming languages: PHP, Ruby, JavaScript, Python, loads of other languages, Perl or CGI as it's sometimes called. And these other languages use AJAX as a way of reloading parts, or either one part or several parts of a web page without refreshing the entire page. So you don't get the intermittent white screen that you see on most web browsers when you load from one page to another if your web server is being a bit slow or your internet connection is being a bit slow. AJAX stops that happening by keeping the web page as static as possible and only reloading certain elements. So we now move on to XML. XML stands for Extensible Markup Language. It's a type of code or language. When it comes to programming and website development, languages are what you use to code. You code in a language. Like you speak English, well, you don't speak these languages, you type them. And then they're processed by a web browser, and that they are turned into a graphical interface. XML is used very commonly these days throughout many different parts of a website to store and to return information in a way that is usable by a website server. So when you send payment details from your online store to a payment provider, so to the bank, to check to see whether the credit card is valid, whether there's enough money available in the balance to be able to make the payment they want to make, they are generally sent in an XML format because it is a format that is very easily read by other servers. It's a standardized format. Like we have phone numbers in the UK that are all 11 digits long, they are a standardized format that we know we can dial any area code and we won't have to try and guess the amount of digits after each area code. And moving on, ASCII. I'll say that again, ASCII. It's like ask E, but with a bit of an accent on the ask. It's quite a peculiar pronunciation. This stands for the American Standard Code for Information Interchange. Now, whilst the internet itself was made by a chap in the UK, the internet was made popular by the Americans. And they did a very good job at it. There's no doubt about that. ASCII is a standard set of codes that allow you to represent any character on any keyboard with a set of numbers. Most characters you can represent with either 2 or 3 numbers. Some require more, depending on which keyboard they come from and which language the character is in. That's what ASCII is. It allows you to represent a character with a number, and you can use those numbers on a website to make sure you get the right character. One very good example of this is the pound sign. The pound sign in the UK is the UK currency sign, and that's fine. In America or on other areas of the world, the pound sign is what we in the UK call a hash symbol. It's 2 lines with a little bit of space between them, crossed by another 2 lines. When you press the pound sign on a non-UK keyboard, that is what appears. And on a website, if the browser viewing the web page is set to a non-UK language, even American English, the website will display what we in the UK call a hash mark instead of a pound sign. So to ensure this doesn't happen, we use an ASCII character code to make sure that the UK currency symbol is always displayed instead of a hash mark when we don't want it to be. And vice versa, to make sure a hash mark is displayed when we don't want the UK currency symbol. The next one is ASP. ASP stands for Active Server Pages. It's an old technology that's no longer used by most websites. It's a programming language, or it's not a programming language, it's a group of 4 programming languages that all work together. ASP was built by Microsoft back in the early 90s, and Microsoft really stopped developing it in around 2007, 2008. And most websites now, if they're based off a Microsoft website server, will use our next acronym, which is ASPX. ASP is also the file name extension. So at the end of the file, you'll have .asp. That is the same for PHP. So you have .php. HTML, you have .html. JS, you have .js. CSS, you have .css, and so on. Most of the languages use their acronym as the file extension. So our next acronym is ASPX. ASPX is the modern version of ASP. It's still being updated by Microsoft. It's a collection of the same 4 languages that work very closely together. Normally, I should say, with ASP and ASPX, you don't change between the languages. You choose one language and you stick to it. Different languages have slightly different abilities, but a majority of the functionality across these languages are the same. So, next we've got CGI. I mentioned CGI earlier. CGI is also sometimes known as Perl. CGI is a programming language referred to as the Common Gateway Interface. It was originally designed and developed for computers and servers that run Linux. You may have heard of the Linux operating system Ubuntu. It's quite a popular free operating system that's used by a lot of web servers nowadays, second only to Red Hat and its free alternative CentOS or CentOS. CGI is included with every version of Linux as a default programming language. If you install nothing when you set up a new server, you can build a piece of code using CGI and it will run. So, next on our list is CSV. CSV is a text-based file, and CSV stands for comma separated values. As I said, it's a text-based file. Think of it like a database in a single text file. Each of the columns is separated by a comma, and each row appears on a new line within the text file. Sometimes you put headers in, sometimes you don't. If you don't, when you import the file into a normal spreadsheet software solution, then it will ask you to put headers in, and it will also ask you if you've used a different delimiter, which is separator between the columns, instead of a comma. The comma is the most common way of doing this, but sometimes people use other items like a semicolon or a colon. In one case, I saw an ampersand being used, but different separators can be used. But most of the time, and generally the most accepted, is a comma. Next on our list is DNS. Now, DNS, you will likely hear it referred to in 2 ways. You will hear people refer to a DNS server, and you will hear people refer to DNS lookups. Now, DNS stands for Domain Name System, and effectively DNS is a huge database of every computer and the web address that you type into the address bar that you would need to go to get to that computer. So for example, if you were to type in www.google.com or www.yahoo.com or any other website you like, there are loads of search engines out there, you would send a request, or your computer would send a request on your behalf to a DNS server, either located within your network, i.e. not on the internet, or out on the internet, and that DNS server will translate that into an IP address, an Internet Protocol address. An IP address is a series of 12 numbers split into 4 blocks of 3. That IP address is the version 4 of the IP address. Version 6 of the IP address is a much longer series of 32 characters split into blocks of 4. I may be wrong on the total number of characters there. I will put a correction out if I am. And those characters, or numbers in version 4's case, refer to the address given by the internet service provider, or the people that you rent the server space or server from, will give you an IP. They will give you an IP address, and that is how the rest of the world knows where to find you. So, to put it in basic terms, you type something into the address bar, it gets converted to a series of numbers. Those numbers tell the computer where to look, and the computer looks at it and goes, do you have this website here? The computer that has that address either says yes or no. If it says yes, provides them a copy of the website. If it says no, the computer goes back to the DNS database and says, that was wrong, do you have another one? Do you have another IP address? And repeats the process again. Next on our list is DOM. DOM stands for Document Object Model. It's a very important part of the JavaScript system and the JavaScript programming language because it allows JavaScript to access, in a hierarchical fashion, all of the elements within a HTML document. And it means that the JavaScript code can alter those elements by directly accessing them. It's extremely important and used within almost everything that has JavaScript, which is, quite fortunately for us, most web pages have JavaScript these days in one shape or form. Next on our list is DTD. Now, this is something that's worth you knowing, but you may not particularly encounter this day to day. Stands for Document Type Definition. And a document type definition tells you, or tells the web browser, what code the document has been written in. This is only used within HTML, but there are multiple different versions of HTML. The original version of HTML that I first encountered 15 years ago was HTML 4.01. And since then, we've had 5 different versions, the latest being HTML5, which is more of a buzzword because the document type definition for HTML5 is just HTML, and it's kind of stripping HTML back and making it as flexible as possible, which makes it very easy for us when we design websites and build websites because we can build them and make a couple of mistakes and it not be picked up by the browser or not be shown to the person who loads the web page. Obviously, we don't want to make mistakes, and we try and look for mistakes before we put the web page online. But if a mistake is made and it isn't caught, then because of the new HTML5, we get a bit of forgiveness from them, which is quite good. So next on our list is FTP. This is one of multiple ways of transferring files. FTP stands for File Transfer Protocol. It's a standard method for transferring files from one computer to another, normally from your computer that you have built your website on to a web server that stores the website online so that everyone can access it. FTP is also used for other things like transferring backups from one machine to another, or when people upload financial transactions in the financial services industry. Sometimes when they have millions of transactions to upload, they create a CSV file and upload the file via FTP to a server which will process the transactions and then send an email to them to tell them that it was successful, or some of them failed, or it all failed. And it's used, as I said, it's mainly used, as far as we're concerned, it's used to transfer files up to the web server so that they can be made available to the public. And remember, all of these are available on the PDF, which is available alongside this. And if you're viewing this on YouTube, you can get the PDF by subscribing to the Web Development Club Facebook group, which is available in the link below the video right now. So the next one on our list is GIF, Graphics Interchange Format. It's a special type of image format that mainly we use for animated images, very short animations that last maybe 5 seconds at the most. It has some transparency, but it's not very good at transparencies, so we don't tend to use it for that reason. And next on our list is one of the other versions of HTML that I was talking about earlier, DHTML. Now, this is quite an old-fashioned phase. This is a very old-fashioned phrase now. We don't use this phrase anymore because almost every website you come across is a DHTML website in one way or another. DHTML stands for Dynamic Hypertext Markup Language. And it means that there is a combination of static HTML, normal static CSS, and JavaScript all in one page. They may be in separate files, but they're all used together on one page. And this is done so the elements of the page can be reloaded at once using Ajax methodologies, or so that you can do other things that make the page dynamic and more interactive for the user. Next on our list is XHTML. Again, this uses a combination of things we've seen before. So HTML, we know, is Hypertext Markup Language, and the X stands for extensible. I always say extendable, and I'm going to stay with extendable. I know it's pronounced extensible, and forgive me for that, but extendable hypertext markup language. Now, this means that the HTML code is written in an XML format, and when a document is marked as XHTML, you still save it with a HTML file extension. And you used to use a different DTD, document type definition. Now, because of the new HTML5 and how forgiving it is, it will recognize that this is XHTML, and it will process, and the web browser will process the page as it is XHTML, the moment it recognizes it, rather than us having to tell the different browsers that it is XHTML and they need to process it as such. So next on our list is one that you no doubt have come across already just by visiting Facebook. HTTP. This stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. It's the standard method which we use to transfer information, normally HTML, and the results of PHP and CSS and other website related files from a server to a web browser so that the web browser can then process it and display it on a page in a graphical format like you would normally. There is obviously no security with this, there's no encryption. There is another version of HTTP which does use encryption, and that is HTTPS, our next acronym. And that stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol, in brackets, secure. I'm not sure why it's in brackets. I assume because it's just a secondary version of the protocol. But this uses a certificate which is different for every website, and you have to have your own IP address as well. You cannot share an IP address across multiple websites with the secured version of HTTPS, but with the unsecured version of HTTP, you can share one IP address across many, many different websites. HTTPS uses something called an SSL certificate. I will explain about SSL in a second. An SSL certificate creates the encryption, or allows the encryption to happen between the server and the web browser typically. It's also used by apps on your smartphone or on your tablet that do things like banking or have retail apps and things like that, like eBay or Amazon, or trying to think of another one, play.com. Yeah, any app that you can get on your smartphone that allows you to check out within the app generally will use HTTPS and will have an SSL certificate. On the websites, you will see the HTTPS in the address bar, and on some websites, depending on the strength and the security associated with the certificate, you might see a green bar or you might see a padlock. You can use HTTPS without a padlock. It means it's a very low security version of a certificate, and it's not as trustworthy as those with a padlock. Next is SSL. SSL stands for Secure Socket Layer. Now, this is the technology which establishes the physical link or the virtual link between the web server and the browser. This establishes that encrypted link. Without the SSL encryption, it would be a normal HTTP connection, and everything you send across the internet will be available for everyone else to read if they choose to. Next on our list is IDE. IDE is Integrated Development Environment. This is normally a piece of software. Nowadays, sometimes we're seeing them being available on websites as well, that allow you to code or write code within the software, and it will also most of the time correct errors that you make as you go along. It may also suggest pieces of code to finish what you're already writing. And one important thing is it's a fully integrated environment if it's an IDE, which means that it will allow you to see what your code will look like when it's processed by a web browser or a server before you upload it to a server, before you send it to a server via FTP. And it does this by opening a window and effectively running a server within that window. The next one is one that many of you may have heard of already, and that is IE. IE stands for Internet Explorer, and it's the previous version of the web browser made by Microsoft. Microsoft finished building or updating Internet Explorer when Windows 10 was released last year, and replaced it with Microsoft Edge, or as it is known sometimes, just Edge. Nice and simple, but a good one to remember. And this one is JPG or JPEG. This is another image format. It was designed by a group of professional photographers to make storing additional information about an image easy. So storing what is now referred to as metadata. So things like the name of the camera, the date and time the image was taken, who took the image, where it was taken, things like the GPS coordinates. All of that information can be stored inside this image format. Both are the same. It's just whether some people prefer to use JPG, some people prefer to use JPEG. JPEG stands for the Joint Photographic Experts Group, and JPEG just drops the word experts and becomes the Joint Photographic Group. These groups are still very active today, and you can get involved online if you choose, if you want to. Next on our list is JSON, which is pronounced like the name Jason, but when you write this, you drop the A. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. Again, this is something that was originally designed for use by just the JavaScript community, and the methodologies used proved so popular that it's been carried on by other areas of the community. Next on our list is NAN. This is an error message. An error message which, if you encounter, you'll want to know how to deal with. Now, NAN stands for or means not a number. And it's very simple. This normally comes up when you've tried to do some arithmetic in your code and you've used one of the variables or elements that you've used as part of that arithmetic is not a number. Sometimes this can happen because the variable or element is set to represent a string or some text. And although that string contains numbers, because you've set that element to be a string or text, it is processed as text and therefore is not a number. And the way to deal with that is you change the element's format from a string to one of the many numeric formats that are available to you. Next on our list is OOP. OOP. Not oops, but OOP. OOP stands for Object Oriented Programming. It's a fairly recent idea. It's a methodology that separates out different parts of the code for your website to make them easy to manage, update, and add to in the future should you need to. It also works in such a way that if someone new looks at your code, they will be able to understand it without any issues at all. Next on our list is OSS. This is open source software. Now, this acronym and the acronym immediately after this both mean the same thing. Open source software is software that is given out free of charge and also the developers of the software have decided to make the code for that software. This also includes a website and an app or anything that you develop on a computer. They've given the software or the finished part of it out free of charge, but also given you the code for it so that if you want to, you can edit it and change it to suit your own needs. And next is FOSS or FLOSS. FOSS means free and open source software. FLOSS means free Libre open source software. Libre is French for free, I believe, which means FLOSS actually means free open source software, but we'll ignore that. Again, it means the same as OSS. I'm not going to go over it again, but it's worth knowing these acronyms on top of OSS, just in case they come up in conversation. Next on our list is PDF. Now, PDF is something you've probably encountered in your day-to-day life. If you work in an office, you've almost definitely received a PDF or sent a PDF at some point. PDF stands for Portable Document Format. And if you've ever sent or received one, I'm sure you'll agree, the name is well earned. It was made popular by the Adobe Corporation's Adobe Acrobat and its free variant, Adobe Acrobat Reader. There are other readers on the market now, but these two were the ones that created the PDF as we know it today. It can display both images and text in any combination or any placement you like. It also has additional security features that allow you to encrypt and secure the information within the PDF so it can't be opened without a password. And in the most recent versions, I believe you can also now secure it so that it can only be opened with a SSL certificate, which is issued to you personally. It's a different type of SSL certificate that is personally issued to you when you develop code or when you have something that requires a level of security. Many government organizations use these types of certificates and store them on the credit card size security cards with their photo on that you see in many government buildings. They actually have a certificate on them, and that certificate is what grants them access to various doors and offices. And also, normally you'll see that in most government departments, they can put their security card into the computer and it will log them on as well. Or it will allow them to log on as well as typing in their username and password. That's because it has an SSL certificate on it. Next on our list is PNG. PNG is the most recent of all of the graphic formats. It was designed by a group of engineers who wanted to store images in a way that was very friendly to being downloaded over a network, so on website, being stored on websites and things like that. It stands for Portable Network Graphics, and it allows you to store in two formats, 8-bit and 24-bit. A bit is the smallest piece of data you can get. 8-bit allows 8 bits of data per pixel, and a pixel is a measure like you would have a pixel on a TV. It's the same thing. 24-bit PNGs have 24 bits of data per pixel. Obviously, 24-bit PNGs are much higher quality than 8-bit PNGs. They also have much better transparency than GIFs. They're the only other graphics format that does transparency. And again, this is because they were designed to be used on or with transferring for websites and the like. So next on our list, and the last one, is ROR, RAR, and it stands for Ruby on Rails. And not, as one person said when I was putting this PDF together, read only rabbits. Not sure where that came from, but that is what the person in question said to me when I asked them what they thought ROR meant. ROR is a framework for the Ruby programming language, or Ruby code. It's based around the MVC concept, which is the Model View Controller concept, which is the same as OOP, or OOP. It allows you to store code in a way which can be easily edited and added to at a later date without other people having to have seen the code beforehand or have to analyze the code to be able to understand the way it was written. And that's it. And as the title of the slide quite clearly says, acronyms are literally everywhere. We've covered 34 today. There are, as I said, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of acronyms out there. I will, as a little surprise for you, I will be publishing next week, possibly earlier, a small website which will be available for the students of this course. And it will allow you to log in. When you log in, on the left hand side, you will see a link that says Acronyms Database, or Acronyms DB. This link will take you to a page that allows you to search for any acronym that you are unsure of. All of these acronyms will be in the database, along with a lot of others. If there is an acronym which you are not sure of and it is not in the database, there will also be an Add Acronym page that you can submit an acronym, whether or not you know what it means, and I will add it to the database as soon as either I've found out what it means, or if I already know what it means, I will add it to the database straight away. Until then, one of the best things you can do is search on the internet for them. But remember, some acronyms have multiple meanings, and you should also always check your information across at least 2 different sources to make sure that what you're being told is correct. Sometimes people mislabel acronyms because they don't quite understand or don't have enough experience in the industry to be able to correctly identify what the acronym stands for. It's as simple as that. Anyway, so thank you for the lesson. Thank you for watching this. And the next lesson will be published on the 12th of March, which is in 1 month's time. It's the second Saturday of March. What you can do is you can go to the web address that I've put on this slide, which is http://uat.cc/WDC, which is an acronym that stands for Web Development Club. We have our own acronym already. And you can vote for what I should do in the next lesson. So thank you for watching this. If you're on YouTube, then please like it and subscribe.